Hi everyone, welcome to Taste of Nutrition, where you can build confidence without restricting food or breaking the bank. If you're new here, be sure to like and subscribe to this channel. All of your support helps me reach more of you. This video isn't telling you to gain weight, lose weight, do anything with your weight. It is simply for educational purposes only and should never, ever replace the advice given to you by your medical doctor or other healthcare professional. And while I understand that everybody has their different viewpoints on whether or not you should count calories, not count calories, do whatever, I really want to emphasize the fact that while you may think one way, another person may think another, and it's my job and my responsibility here to provide you with accurate, evidence-informed information so you can make the best decision for yourself. I'd rather give you the information that is correct and that will be helpful for your health than you go on some weird website that gives you completely wrong information and potentially could be harmful for you. And finally, just remember that general advice can never be directly translated to personal advice. We all have our own health conditions, situations, past histories that we have to take into consideration when we decide which foods to eat, which supplements to take, etc. So always be mindful of that when you're looking at any YouTube video. And with that, let's dive into today's video. What is a calorie surplus and what is a calorie deficit? Before I tell you what a calorie deficit and a calorie surplus is, we actually need to understand what are calories and what is the purpose of a calorie. So if we want to be technical, the definition of a calorie is the amount of energy required to raise 1 kilogram of water by 1 degree Celsius, and that's the definition of it. Obviously, most people don't think in terms of these sciencey terms, and usually when we think of calories, we think of food. We think of food we can eat in the form of calories, and then how we can move or exercise to expend or get rid of these calories. When it comes to calories, there are 4 ways you can get them: through carbs, through fats, through proteins, and through alcohol. Carbs provide 4 calories per gram. Proteins provide 4 calories per gram. Fats provide 9 calories per gram, so they are much more energy dense or calorically dense than carbohydrates and protein. And then we have alcohol, which provides 7 calories per gram. Although calories have been vilified in the past, we really need to stop looking at them as good versus bad. There's something that we really need in our lives in order to just survive and function. A really good way to think about calories is like a car. A car has a fuel tank, and in order for it to even move, it needs fuel in the form of gasoline. So you do have to give it some gasoline or energy to get it to move. But at the same time, the fuel tank, once it's full, it doesn't really need any more calories to do its function. So there's kind of this baseline amount we need, and then we have a maximum as well. For the average person, the majority of calories we eat actually just goes to simple physiological functions, such as breathing, such as having our heartbeat, regulating our body temperature, digestion, and so on. This is called our resting metabolic rate or our basal metabolic rate, depending on which definition you choose to. A normal average person, knowing the difference between resting metabolic rate and basal metabolic rate won't substantially make that much of a difference for you. So if you see someone using resting metabolic rate or basal metabolic rate, don't worry too much, it's not that big of a difference. Up to 70% of our daily calories just goes to physiological function, so basically just surviving. And I know that comes as a shock because a lot of people think of calories as kind of that fuel we need to go work out, for example. But in reality, our bodies need a substantial amount of calories just to function at baseline. Now, since people do move around throughout the day and they're not just, going to the washroom, going to the kitchen and calling it a day, maybe some days, but for the most of us, we have to go to work, we have to walk our dog, we go to the mall, we go do workouts. There are things that we do to move, and this isn't included in that resting metabolic rate or basal metabolic rate equation. We need to account for that kind of additional 30% of calories that our body uses in a day towards these functions. The key thing here is that if you're moving, you burn calories. You're not burning calories. So me sitting here making this video, I am burning quite a few calories just by moving my hands, by talking, and also, again, those physiological functions. And you watching this video right now, you are also, believe it or not, burning calories. This is called our non-resting energy expenditure, and this accounts for all movement beyond our basic functions, again, such as breathing, digestion, heart rate, etc. The thing about this is that it becomes more nuanced and individual because it's really based on what we do in a day. And this brings us to our total daily energy expenditure. And this is the key amount of calories that you need to know about in order to calculate your calorie deficit or your calorie surplus. So your total daily energy expenditure is the amount of calories you need to fill your fuel tank. So it's the amount your body completely needs to satisfy all energy needs such as, again, your basic functions, all the way to working out. First, we need to calculate our resting metabolic rate or our basal metabolic rate. And there are so many different ways that we can calculate this, some being more accurate, but less convenient, and some being less accurate but way more convenient. If you want to be really, really technical and you want to know exactly what your body is expending to the best of science's ability, you would need to go into a laboratory setting and use what's known as indirect calorimetry or other types of laboratory tests. The problem with these is that who has access to this? Very few people have access to these types of high quality testing. So for most people, I would recommend using some equations that may not be the most accurate, but they are convenient in giving you kind of an estimate of what your body needs in a day. So there are two equations. So there's the Mifflin-St. Jeor as well as the Harris-Benedict equation, and they are slightly different, but they give relatively similar numbers. Now keep in mind that some research studies have shown that these equations as well as other equations can have up to 1,000 calories of error when you calculate these numbers. But for most people, I'd say they're relatively accurate. And again, if you're just trying to give a ballpark of what you need, these are very useful. Now, one thing I want to highlight is that a lot of people, especially on my TikTok, comment that they use a lot of online calculators and they say that they need 1,200 calories per day. These online calculators are super, super flawed, and they tend to underestimate somebody's needs more than they would overestimate. And if you want a whole video on why 1,200 calories isn't enough, I can totally give that to you. Just let me know in the comments below. So let's go through each equation. I will put the actual equations in my description box below so that you can calculate it on your own time. So we'll start off with the Mifflin-St. Jeor, and it does depend on whether or not you're a male or a female. So if you're a male, you're going to need to use this equation. 9.99 times your weight in kilograms plus 6.25 times your height in centimeters, subtract 4.92 times your age plus 5. And if you're a female, you're going to want to use 9.99 times your weight in kilograms plus 6.25 times your height in centimeters, subtract 4.92 times your age, subtract 161. So the Mifflin-St. Jeor is one of the more popular equations, but I'll also show you the Harris-Benedict. So if you're a male, you'll need to take 88.4 plus 13.4 times your weight in kilograms plus 4.8 times your height in centimeters, subtract 5.68 times your age. And if you're a female, you're going to need to use this equation. 447.6 plus 9.25 times your height in kilograms plus 3.10 times your height in centimeters, subtract 4.33 times your age. All of these equations use weight in kilograms, centimeters in height, and age in years. So make sure you're using those proper values in order to make sure you're getting the right numbers. So I'll give you an example. Let's say you're a 32-year-old female that weighs 75 kilograms or 165 pounds, and you're about 5'7" or 170 centimeters. If we were to use these equations, then your BMR would be somewhere around 1,493 to 1,530 calories, depending on which equation you used. This means that you would need about 1,500 calories in a day just to function without any activity. Once you figure that out, and remember everyone's numbers are going to be different, so never ever ever compare yours to someone else's, you need to then consider how active you are and take into account that to calculate your true needs. 5 activity factors you can choose to calculate your needs based on these equations. The first one is sedentary. So if you get very minimal or no exercise, you would take your BMR and multiply it by 1.2. If you're lightly active, this means you exercise lightly 1 to 3 days a week. You would multiply your BMR by 1.375. If you're moderately active, this means that you exercise moderately 3 to 5 days a week, and you would multiply your BMR by 1.55. If you're very active, which means you engage in really hard, vigorous exercise 6 to 7 days a week, then you would multiply your BMR by 1.725. And if you're extra active, and this is quite rare, but if you are extra active, it would mean you engage in extremely hard exercise 3 to 7 days a week. So basically you're an elite athlete, or you have an extremely physical job. In this case, you would multiply your BMR by 1.9. Now, if we use our example of the 32-year-old female, if she is moderately active, meaning she exercises about 3 to 5 days a week, then we would need to take her BMR and multiply it by 1.55. But we'll use the bottom end of her calorie needs using the equation we used. So 1,493 calories times 1.55 equals 2,314 calories in a day. This means that this person would need 2,314 calories per day to support her basic functions as well as her exercise. One thing I want to highlight is these equations have a number of limitations, and that's why they're less accurate than laboratory settings. First and foremost, these equations don't take into consideration your muscle mass, your fat mass, your race, your genetics, different types of history that you've had with dieting, for example, which can impact your metabolism. None of these things are taken into consideration, so it is not a perfect science using these equations. But as a general estimate, they're very useful to use, and again, they kind of give you a ballpark of the calories you need to eat in a day just to maintain your weight and support your overall functions. Now, keep in mind that most people don't go out of their way to count calories, and I don't recommend that you start if you don't want to. However, understanding the amount of calories you need in a day can be quite useful for some people. Some people realize that they're under eating and need to eat more calories, and some people realize that maybe they're having a few too many calories and they could taper it back a little bit. Again, I'm not telling you what to do. This is just simply for you if you want to use it. Now, I'm going to talk about scenarios when I would never recommend calorie counting and when these equations are probably inappropriate. So stay tuned to the end of the video when I'll talk about that. All right, so we'll finally talk about what is a calorie surplus and what is a calorie deficit and when would you use either. As the name suggests, a calorie surplus means that you're going over your calorie needs in a day. So again, if we use the example of the 32-year-old female that needs about 2,300 calories in a day, if she were to eat, let's say, 3,000 calories in a day, she would be in a calorie surplus because she's going over the amount of calories her body needs. If you constantly eat in a calorie surplus, meaning that, you don't just occasionally overeat, but usually you're overeating on a daily basis, over time, your body's going to realize it has a lot of extra energy sitting around and it'll start to store it as fat. On the other hand, a calorie deficit is the complete opposite. It means that you're not eating enough calories to meet your total needs in a day. Same thing, if you're eating in a calorie deficit over a long period of time consistently, then your body is going to start using your fat stores as energy because you're not providing your body with enough calories through food. And over time, you will lose weight. Now, I want to talk about a couple things that are really important when it comes to a calorie deficit or a calorie surplus. First thing is that you will not gain or lose weight if you're in a calorie surplus or a calorie deficit every so often. Keep in mind that we are almost never going to eat the right amount of calories our body needs in a day. Again, one, because we can't calculate it, so we don't know. But two, our body isn't doing the same thing every day. Some days we go to the gym, some days we sit on the couch and watch TV all day, and sometimes we do something in between. If we weren't able to adjust naturally, we would constantly be gaining and losing weight all the time. Our body is so smart and we don't give it enough credit. Our body is able to adapt on a day-to-day basis if we eat in a slight calorie deficit or a slight calorie surplus. And as a result, we usually kind of stay around the same weight from a day-to-day basis. So let's say you go to a party and you have 3 slices of pizza, you have 2 beers, and let's say you have a piece of cake later. And obviously, likely you'll be in a calorie surplus because you're eating a large volume of calories from calorie-dense foods such as pizza, beer, and cake. But the thing is if you've ever done this, and I hope you have because it's quite enjoyable sometimes, but if you have done that, you'll notice that you didn't all of a sudden gain weight the next day. You might be a little bloated, you might have a little water retention, but you won't actually gain physical weight in terms of fat storage. This is because our body goes, okay, I have a little bit of extra calories that I've consumed in the day, so I'm just gonna adapt the metabolism a little bit to account for that. This is also why if you've restricted your calories in a day, and let's say you ate an iceberg lettuce salad and you didn't eat a lot of calories throughout the day and you exercised a lot, you all of a sudden don't just lose a bunch of weight either. So on a day-to-day basis, if you're eating a little under, a little over, and you're not doing it on a consistent basis, you're not just all of a sudden going to gain or lose weight. And this is why I wouldn't be so fearful of overeating one day. If you wanna enjoy some cake, or you want to enjoy, your grandma's apple pie or whatever, just go and enjoy it. It's not going to make a significant impact on your overall results. I promise you that. The next thing I want to talk about is that more isn't always better. Now, this is very important to understand, and of everything I talk about today, this is the most important thing. Now, if you're trying to gain or lose weight, it would make sense that, well, if I want to gain weight, I'll be in a really large calorie surplus. And if I want to lose weight, I'll be in a really large calorie deficit because that just makes sense mathematically. But that is not how the body works, and this is why a lot of people fail with their health goals over time. Our body is tightly regulated and it hates change, like really hates it. It doesn't want you to change. It wants to stay the same, and it likes to fight with you if you try to change it, especially if you try to do it too fast. Like some really, stubborn people, if you try to throw change at them all at once, they're probably going to resist it. But if you kind of slowly hint at little changes over time, you can probably over time convince them to do it. So let's say you're trying to lose weight and you want to be in a calorie deficit. Again, logic would say, okay, well, I'll just be in a super large calorie deficit because that will help me lose weight since I'm not giving my body enough calories, and I'll use a bunch of my fat stores as energy and therefore I'll lose weight. Problem with that is that when our body is in a super large calorie deficit, it puts in mechanisms to prevent that from happening. So for example, your metabolism may slow down a little bit, not to the extent people think it does, but it will slow down a little bit. You may notice that you feel really sluggish or super tired. And for example, if you're trying to do a workout, you may just not have the energy you normally do. And the reason for this is simply your body is telling you that I don't have enough calories, I don't have enough energy, so no, I don't want you to do a good workout. I want you to expend as few calories as possible. So you may notice you feel really sluggish. And your body may also start to release different hormones in different amounts to get you to eat more. So for example, ghrelin may be released in higher amounts and leptin may be released in lower amounts to get you to eat more food. And that is not starvation mode. That is called metabolic adaptation and is well cited in the literature as mechanisms that your body puts in place if you have too large of a calorie deficit. And I do wish people would stop using the term starvation mode because one, it has a bad rep, and two, it doesn't do a good job hitting the mark on what's really happening in the body. But your body does lower its metabolism. It does release different hormones to get you to eat more. It does make you feel sluggish and tired so that you don't move around as much in the day. All of these things do exist, and again, that is called metabolic adaptation. So if you want to be in a calorie deficit and you want to do it in the safest way possible and so that your body doesn't freak out and do all these metabolic adaptations, I would suggest being in a very small calorie deficit. And yes, it's going to take longer for you to lose weight, but you'll be able to keep it off longer. You won't be miserable doing it. And overall, it's just more sustainable for you, so you can do it in the long term. So if we use the calories we calculated earlier, 10% of 2,300 calories would be 230 calories, and 20% would be 460 calories. Keep in mind, a lot of people don't realize that you can split it up. You don't have to just not eat 460 calories in a day, which actually is harder to do than you think, especially trying to do it long term. What you could do instead is increase your physical activity a little bit. So let's say you burn an extra 230 calories a day, and then let's say maybe you don't have as large of portions and you decrease your total intake by about 230 calories in a day, and that would achieve a deficit of 460 calories. Personally, I recommend doing a split because if you're trying to reduce your calories from food substantially, you're going to feel hungry, you're going to feel like you're missing out, and it's really not an enjoyable experience because who really likes to restrict food? It's not a fun experience, and it's not something that most people can do long term. But people can, make slightly smaller portion sizes and increase their physical activity a little bit. That's something that's more sustainable and what people can do and manage more long term. And keep in mind, again, the larger the deficit you do, so if you start going into the 500, 600, 700 calorie deficits that a lot of people try to do, it's going to be very hard for you to maintain long term. First of all, your body is going to start putting in those different metabolic adaptations to kind of prevent you from doing it long term. But you're also going to feel hungry. You're going to feel like you're missing out on events. So for example, if you're celebrating Christmas or Thanksgiving or any other holiday, you may notice that, oh man, I have to eat broccoli and chicken while everyone else gets to eat good food. It's not an enjoyable experience, and food is so much more than just calories. It's social events, it's our culture, it's enjoyment. We eat food to feel happy, sad. It's not just solely calories, and we need to appreciate that when we're trying to eat healthily and also be happy. So again, a small deficit is your best way to go. So let's go back and look at the 32-year-old female as our example. That person needed 2,314 calories in a day to maintain her weight. If we want a 10 to 20% deficit, then we would just need to subtract 230 to 460 calories from her total daily energy expenditure. So if we do the math, that would equate to about 1,854 calories to 2,084 calories in a day, and that would give her a realistic deficit considering her activity to help her lose weight slowly but steadily. And just keep in mind that a healthy, sustainable weight loss is about 1 to 2 pounds a week, and that's the max you should be aiming for. Now, I understand that seems a lot higher than calculators you've used online or fitness gurus that you've talked to, but the calculators that you're using or the people that are creating these super large deficits are trying to get you to lose weight substantially fast. And yes, you might lose weight really quickly. And yes, you might be able to sustain it for, let's say, 6 months. But over time, it's going to be harder and harder and harder for you to do. And you may end up gaining a lot of that weight back over time. So instead, I highly suggest that you do a slow calorie deficit. It's the best way for you to have long, sustainable results. So finally, let's talk about a calorie surplus. The same principles apply. So I would use about 10 to 20% over your calorie needs in a day. And that would give you a surplus that can help you gain weight slowly, but in a healthy way. You don't just want to go into a super large calorie surplus all of a sudden because it's a big hit on your body. So if you were having 1,000 extra calories per day, again, that's hard on your body and you're going to end up storing a lot of that as fat. And if that's your goal, that's fine, but I would still recommend that you eat calories and increase your calorie intake slowly. So if you're trying to build muscle, one, you need to make sure you're eating enough protein at a meal, and I can do a whole video on that if you want. But two, if you're eating too many calories, so you're eating like an extra 1,000 calories a day, a lot of that's going to be stored as fat. And again, if your goal is to gain muscle, that's not really going to work out in your favor. So again, at the end of the day, keep in mind that all of this information can be helpful, but if you really want personalized advice, you need to go see a qualified health professional such as a dietitian who can help calculate these needs and serve you best. Now, to end off this video, I want to talk about when all of this information isn't right for you, and I would never ever recommend calorie counting for you. First and foremost, I want to say that at the end of the day, you should listen to your body. If you're really, really hungry, you need to eat. That's it. If your body is telling you and screaming at you to eat food, don't worry about the deficit. You need to eat. Your body is screaming at you to eat food because it needs it. And I am an advocate for intuitive eating, but I recognize that intuitive eating doesn't work for everybody. And it's easy for me to say as a dietitian who's had over 6 years of training and university education in nutrition to eat intuitively because I already know this. I already know how many calories are in most foods. I already know how many calories I roughly need in a day. So it's easy for me to be like, okay, eat intuitively. So sometimes learning calories, the calories that are in food and the calories that you need in a day can be extremely helpful. Counting calories isn't always about losing weight. Calorie counting can be about just understanding, are you serving your body right? And I think that's really important we start to understand. Now, with that being said, once you do have an idea of how many calories you need in a day, and you have an understanding of food and you kind of are in a good rhythm with it, then I would suggest tapering off the calorie counting because, again, intuitive eating and really just listening to our body is the end goal. But you do what's best for you and I can respect that. However, there are situations when I would never, ever recommend calorie counting, and these include somebody with a history of disordered eating or eating disorders. If you're a person that takes numbers to heart, you obsess over every single calorie, and you feel extreme guilt if you overeat, you really don't enjoy calorie counting or you simply don't want to, or you already have a good understanding of nutrition and your body's needs and it really wouldn't benefit you. I understand that calorie counting can be very taboo and very triggering for some people, and if it really bothers you and it's something that doesn't work for you, please do not do this. It's not going to be helpful for you and it probably will do more harm. But again, it can be helpful for some people, and this is why I'm making this video, because for those people, this can be helpful towards them achieving their health goals. At the end of the day, you need to find out what works best for you. I think in today's day, we're so passionate about nutrition and fitness that we forget that not everyone has the same bodies, the same goals, or the same life. It's okay if your eating philosophies don't 100% line up with somebody else's. We all have different goals, we all have different lifestyles, and we all have different approaches to health that are meaningful to us. If you found today's video helpful, please be sure to give it a like and subscribe, and let me know in the comments any other topics you want me to address. I'm always looking for ideas and I can't wait to hear from you, and I'll see you next time.